Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hinei Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Hello, welcome to Pirkei Avos with Rabeinu Yonah. We're on chapter 2, Mishnah number 8. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai kibu Hillel and Shammai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. Hu haya omer, he used to say, Im lamadat Torah harbe, if you've learned a lot of Torah, al taksik tayva latzmecha, don't think you're so great. Ki lekach notzart, because that's the reason that you were created. Chamisha talmidim hayu Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. We're going to explain more when we get to Rabeinu Yonah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. Ve'elu hein. These are them. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yosei HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanov, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch. Now, Hu haya moneh shivchan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai explained the praise of each of his students. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus, bor sud she'enu me'abe tipa. He was like a hole that was lined with limestone. It was like paved over, that didn't lose a drop. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Ashrei Yoladatu. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, praiseworthy is the one who birthed him. Rabbi Yosei HaKohen Chassid. Rabbi Yosei the priest was a pious person. Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanel, Yarei Chet. And Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanel was one who feared sin. Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, Kemayin HaMiskaber. Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch was like a overflowing spring. Hu haya omer, he used to say, Im yu kol chochmei Yisrael bekaf maznayim, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus bekaf shniya machriyas kulam. If all of the sages of the Jewish people were on one side of a scale, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus was on the other side, he would outweigh them all. Abba Shaul omer mishmo, Abba Shaul said in his name, Im yu kol chochmei Yisrael bekaf maznayim, if all the sages were on one side of a scale, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus afimayim, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus was with them on that side of the scale. Rabbi Elazar b'kaf shniya, and Rabbi Elazar was on the other side of the scale. Machriya es kulam. He would outweigh them all. Okay, so let's see what Rabeinu Yonah has to say, explaining what this Mishnah means. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai kibu Hillel and Shammai. So what does it mean that if you learned a lot of Torah, al tachzik tov la'atzmecha, don't think you're so great because you were created. This is the reason you were created. V'adayin ap tabarosh says if you learned a lot of Torah, it means you're still at the beginning. Where are you going to get to the middle of the end? The Torah is huge. It's larger than the sea. And a human intellect is not able to plumb the depths of the entire Torah, to get to learn every single part of Torah. And everybody is far from this. How can you, kind of pat yourself on the back and say, "Oh, I did a great job. I learned a lot of Torah." How can you say that when you've only learned 1/1000th of what you're supposed to learn? So again, this doesn't mean we shouldn't feel good that we're studying Torah. It means that there shouldn't be an attitude like, "Yeah, I learned a lot of Torah. I know enough. I know most of the Torah. I'm pretty good. I'm all set. I can stop learning now." It's coming to say that's the wrong attitude, because the Torah is really infinite, the amount that we can learn and the amount that we compare different laws to each other and different ideas. And every time you learn something new. We're talking about the knowledge, the das of Hashem, the mind of God. The mind of God is infinite. So Torah also, which is an expression of the mind of God, is also infinite. So a person shouldn't think, "I learned so much, what's the point of learning anymore?" So it says, "Ki lekach notzarta, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo himtziacha yesh ma'ayin rak lasos Torah." So very powerful thing here. He says, Hashem only made human beings that they should study Torah. Therefore, if you learned a lot of Torah, you shouldn't say, pat yourself on the back and say, "Oh, I'm so great because I learned Torah." Because that's what you were created for. Mashal balchov sheparachova. It's like a debtor who pays his loan. Someone borrows money and returns it. Would the person who loaned him money, would he say, "Oh, great job, you did such a great job"? That's what he's supposed to do. You're supposed to repay a loan. So too, we were created, we're supposed to learn Torah. So we shouldn't say, "Oh, we're so wonderful. I'm learning Torah. Look at me. I'm so great. No, you were created to learn Torah. V'zu amida gam kein hi al mitzvahs, and the same thing for mitzvahs when it comes to fulfilling the commandments. She'ima sisa harbe al tachzik tova la'atzmacha ki lekach natzarta. If you did a lot of great mitzvahs, you shouldn't be arrogant about it. You shouldn't be prideful, because that's what you're created for. You're created to do mitzvahs. Again, we should feel good that we're studying Torah and doing mitzvahs and we are fulfilling the will of Hashem, but we shouldn't be arrogant and prideful, because this is what we were created for, to study Torah. And also the beginning reason that Torah is infinite, and even if we've learned a ton of Torah, we still have so much left to learn. So now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai listed all of his students and listed the praises of each student. So let's learn the praises of each student. So it said that Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus was like a hole in the ground that was like paved over with limestone. Why? Because a drop of liquid would never come out of it. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus never forgot anything he learned. Just like after you pave over a hole with limestone, give it a built-in pool, it doesn't lose any drop. Because even in the walls, the water doesn't get absorbed. If you have a good pool and it's paved, you're not going to lose any water through the walls. Yeshua ben Hanania, praise and happy is the one who birthed him. Lashon Ashrei, when we use the word Ashrei, Bestam hu koilel, when we just use it in a general sense, it comes to include every positive attribute. And it includes every positive attribute that a person can be praised for. And sometimes it relates to a specific attribute. The verse refers to it when it comes to fear of Hashem. It says, Ashrei ish yares Hashem, praiseworthy is the man who fears God. Also, it says regarding someone who sets a place to study Torah, not just a time to study Torah, but he has a special place to study Torah. As it says, Ashrei Adam Shomea li lishkar al dososa yom yom. Praiseworthy is a person who listens to me, and he sits by my doors every day. V'namar, and it says, Ashrei yoshvei v'secha. Praiseworthy are those that sit in your house. V'ala devekos, when it comes to being close to Hashem, Shenamar Ashrei tivchar uskarev. Praiseworthy is the one who chooses and comes close. V'ala emuna, and on faith in Hashem, Shenamar Ashrei Adam ozlo bach. Praiseworthy is the person who has strength in him. Also, it uses the word Ashrei when it comes to not doing evil. Praiseworthy is the person that doesn't go in the ways of the wicked. So that's why here we said, when it comes to Yeshua ben Hanania, praiseworthy is the one who birthed him. That is to say, he had all of these attributes, all these positive attributes he had. Gadol b'chachma, he was great in wisdom, and in everything that he did, every topic that he was engaged in, and all of his character traits, it was all dedicated to one purpose, to Hashem. Yossi HaKohen Chassid. Yossi HaKohen was Chassid. He was pious. He would go above the letter of the law in everything that he did. We see this in many places in the Talmud. Midas Chasidus Shanukan. Midas Chasidus. Sometimes the Gemara says Midas Chasidus. Right? When we use the word chassid nowadays, we don't use it as it was used in the Talmud. Chassid, now refers to somebody who has certain customs and often wears a fur hat and has certain payas and different customs and has a rebbe from Europe. But when the Gemara used chassid, it was referring to a person who would go above the letter of the law in everything that they did. That doesn't mean many chassidim are chassidim, but many non-chassidim are also chassidim. Okay. Shimon ben Nesanel Yarech. Shimon, the son of Nesanel, feared sin. He would make a fence around the Torah to be careful to not violate any sins. Right? It wasn't just that he was careful to observe the letter of the law, but he said, for example, many of these we have in the Torah. We don't have milk 6 hours after meat. That's probably not such a great example. We don't eat chicken with milk because it resembles meat with milk. So even though the Torah only forbids meat with milk, we don't eat chicken with milk as a siyag. So it sounds like Rabbi Shimon ben Nesanel, he would do even more. He was so afraid of sin, he would be very, very careful not to even get close to sin. Right? If you're afraid of lions, then you would be, very, very afraid of lions. You might be very careful to not even go to Africa or to not even go to the zoo, to go as far as you can away from lions. So if you're afraid of sin, you'll do your best to remain as far as possible away from sin. Okay, let's finish up. Elazar ben Arach, Mayna Misgaber, he was an overwhelming spring. Shahayim bepulful harbe ubal svara. He had great logic when it came to Torah. And he would come with novel interpretations through his logic when learning Torah. Hu Hay Omer, so he used to say, if all the sages of the Jewish people were on one side and Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus was on the second side, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus would outweigh them all. Ratzalaim means to say in his knowledge. But we said Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus was the one who never forgot anything he learned. There was nobody in the Jewish people that knew as much as him. He never forgot anything that he learned ever. And then we said that if all the sages in the Jewish people and Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus were on one side of the scale, then Rabbi Elazar ben Arach would outweigh them all. Why was that? So here we're talking about not in knowledge, but in logical capabilities and sharpness of the mind to come up with novel interpretations. So these two rabbis, these two things, lines in the Mishnah are not arguing. So we're saying that these two things with the scale, we said two examples of the scale, they're not arguing on each other, but we said when it came to knowledge of Torah, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus was the greater one, but when it came to logical capabilities and, let's say, sharpness of the mind to come up with new ideas in Torah, that Rabbi Elazar ben Arach was greater. We see from here, you see that every rabbi had a different thing that he was known for. You see that also by many Gedolei Yisrael, and many, still nowadays, many great rabbis that, right, we don't make, in Judaism there's no cookie cutter. We don't have cookie cutters. Every human being has different attributes where he or she excels. And you see here, even these great rabbis in the times of the Talmud, they were each praised for a different thing. Obviously, I'm sure Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanus was also very sharp and able to come up with a lot of svaras. And Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, I'm sure, was also knew quite a bit of Torah. But there was a specific area where each one of them shines. So too, even though we're all expected to excel in Judaism, then I'm sure there's certain areas we all have where we could shine specifically and could be known for. Okay, it's a little longer today, but with that, I wish you a great day.